Hey guys, Miss Yandell here. I hope you're having a super great week, and more than that, I hope you're outside today enjoying this awesome weather like I am. So I have these two videos to shoot, one for this class and one for my English Lit class, and I thought what better idea than to come outside and enjoy the sunshine, right? So you're with me right now on the second floor of the Ollie Center where they have these tables set up, and we're supposed to be able to come out here and go outside, but the doors are often locked. Has anybody found that to be true? So apparently a lot of people haven't been able to take advantage of it because they've kept the doors locked. But I'm out here now, and we're going to talk a little bit today about the next movement in American literature, which is Romanticism. So if you want to get your hand out, just go ahead and pause me for a second and get that. Well, you know, I could just leave it running so you can see all the traffic and Kavanaugh in the background. I know a lot of you guys are from here, but some of you may not be. It's really gorgeous. Anyway, so we're going to start with Romanticism, and you can see that the dates here for Romanticism are the 1700s to the 1800s. For those of you who are also enrolled in my English Lit class, this information, you know a lot more about it and more in-depth information because we're looking at the English Romantics in that class right now. But anyway, let's talk about Romanticism in general, how it affected the American writers, and just it also is true of the English as well, as many of you can attest. But let's look at the notes, shall we? So first it starts talking about liberalism in literature. And I'm telling you what, this is one of the best things ever, because in the Romantic movement, we see people deciding that it's okay to write about what you want to write about. And two people that are listed at the end of this, Samuel Taylor Coleridge and William Wordsworth, published this preface to this book of poetry in 1798. And one of the things that that preface says is that poetry should not be planned. Poetry also should not be written in some awful room. And sometimes I think, please don't quote me on this, don't write the college president about this, but sometimes I think it's just pretty awful that we have to study poetry in boring classrooms. Can I get a witness? I mean, they would be mortified that we're looking at some of their literature, I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud or something like that, in a classroom with like these ugly walls that we're not even allowed to paint. But that's a different story for another time. Anyway, liberalism in literature it talks about the subject matter. They start talking about subjects that weren't popular to talk about at the time. And they also start writing poetry that seems more natural, and it frees them from like patterns. And how many of you studied poetry, perhaps even sonnets, etc.? And they're beautiful, but it was very contrived. Do you know what I mean? Like they had to plan it and plot it, and if there was an extra syllable, they had to get rid of it. We start seeing here this preference for what comes naturally and connecting to like something bigger than just like some kind of mathematical equation. Poetry is beautiful, and I hope after this class, I know we're in Intro to Lit here, but I hope after this class that you really come to appreciate how wonderful poetry is. Not all poetry is contrived, and if you haven't read much poetry at all, I dare you to keep reading and experiment and see which kind you like and which kind is interesting to you. So, you know, I'm always telling you to think about these movements and which ones you like. And I'm going to tell you, I'm a little biased because I love Romantic literature. And that probably will come out in some of what I'm saying today. So forgive me, I just get excited. All right. Well, we're going to go to the next thing. The freeing of the artist and writer from restraints and rules. Doesn't that sound awesome? Maybe I'm just that little kid who inside that just hated it when people told me 99 million things that I needed to do. I mean, why? I can figure it out. I'll get there. Just let me do this thing. I'm okay. I can color outside of the lines. I was the kid that really had a hard time coloring inside of the lines. Anybody else out there? Can I get a witness? And I always felt like I was disappointing somebody, but I never could. I mean, my teachers would look at me and go, "Shirley, bless your heart." You know, maybe that's why I love Romanticism so much, is because who cares? I mean, it's colorful, it's beautiful. Who cares if everything's inside the lines or not? All right, sorry. Moving on, suggesting that phase of individualism. Oh, that's one of my favorite words is individualism. How about you? Marked by the encouragement of revolutionary political ideas. And this is where you kind of see how connected these movements are to politics. because what happens in literature is often reflected in the society as well. All right. The predominance of imagination. Oh my gosh, here we go with another one of my favorite words. I'm sorry if you hate this movement. I've just got to tell you, because I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, I love this too. Oh my gosh, this is my favorite. But this really is my favorite. Imagination over reason and formal rules. This is where you start seeing imaginations go crazy, right? Like what you can dream, what you can write about, it's yours to write about and dream. I love that. How many of you guys have an imagination? And how many of you guys have been accused of having an over imagination? All right. And over the sense of fact or the actual realism. Realism comes after this. This is the movement that's going to come after this one. And there's a place, there's a time and a place for that. I'm not saying I want to live in a fantasy world. Do you guys remember that movie about the blue people? What was that called? Avatar or something like that? Do you remember when they put that movie out? You know, they're on this planet and they're digging for oil, and some people are just trying to connect with the people there. Do you remember the aliens there? Well, after that movie aired, there was like an article about this. They had to put psychologists and outside of some movie theaters, because people watching that movie would come out, even though it was strictly fantasy, hello, people would come out and be super uber depressed, and they'd have to have somebody. We'll just pause a moment to let that wonderful vehicle pass in the background, huh? But anyway, they literally had therapists outside of movie theaters because people were depressed after they watched that movie. They were just sad about having to go back to real life. Okay, that's not me, and that's not healthy. If you're constantly engrossed in fantasy land, you're probably missing out on a lot that's going on, right? But on the other side of that coin, I enjoy fantasy, and I enjoy like being able to read about things and going places in my imagination. How many of you guys love to read and love to read certain books that took you places? Well, that's what this is about. And anyway, we'll talk about some of those book series here in a minute. I've got a lot on my brain, can you tell? All right. Love of nature. Oh my gosh, I love nature. And when I say I love nature, it's not that I love like bugs and stuff like that, but I love nature. It's so peaceful, and there's something really beautiful about nature. And you see the romantics really connecting with this idea. Those of you who are in my English romantic literature class know that nature is a central part of what they write. And interestingly, a lot of romantics believed that the purest stuff would come out of you when you were actually in nature. Now, I may be sitting outside right now, but there's not a lot of nature. You're seeing the mountain, you're seeing the grass behind me, but I'm hearing a lot of cars right now, and that's uber sad. They also would not be uber thrilled with the fact that we're sitting here and we can't even have a conversation without revving engines behind us. Can I get a witness to that? Well, anyway, so they loved nature. Let's go to the next one. They had a sympathetic interest in the past. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, it means they glamorized the past, like they made it romantic. They didn't tell everything exactly how it was. They had a sympathetic. So if you like historical romance novels, for instance, does anybody know what I'm talking about? Where you go back to the past and you see things that are mostly true, but there's like this big romance or this big story that maybe didn't actually happen, or it's fictionalized and they only tell one side of it. They're not really telling everything. Rose-colored glasses, you know, they have this specific lens going on. That's what's talking about sympathetic. They're not giving you an accurate depiction of the past, the you know, the graphic, the bad, the horrific, the ugly. They're just telling you what it is they're wanting to show you. So they have a sympathetic interest in the past. They don't always tell every side of the story or the horrors of war. You know what I mean? Not horrors, but horrors. 2 syllables, not one. All right, anyway. So look at the next one, guys. You'll know if you're a lover of this time period on this next one. Medieval. Medieval times is a focus. They love this. And doesn't this remind you of like common modern day interests of things that we go to watch at the theater about vampires and Harry Potter and all that stuff is very romantic in nature. It's written today, but it's about the imagination. I mean, hopefully people really don't turn into wolves and vampires and all sorts of other really weird things, but it's fun to go there in our imagination, right? So I went to Hogwarts at Universal Studios this past summer. It was fantastic, and talk about a wonderful place to go. People, Go, go, go. It was fabulous if you're an HP fan. All right, anyway, let's move on. I'm just trying not to keep talking so long. I'm sorry. Okay, mysticism, which mysticism includes a number of things that are like otherworldly, and this would include magic or questions of the great beyond or any kind of spiritualized material. And people like to read about this stuff, mysticism, why things happen, and just things that can't be explained, because it lets your imagination go. What's wrong with that? Everything doesn't have to be explained. And if you say that you would prefer everything to be explained, then romanticism is probably not your go-to movement, in your personal life. But do you know people like this? Or are your kids a lot like this? They enjoy reading about things that aren't necessarily provable or the absolute truth, so help us God. All right, let's go to the next one. They favored in poetry blank verse and fresher language and bolder figures. I mean, what's wrong with that? Nothing. All right. The idealization of rural life. And this is kind of what I was talking about with the interest in the past. When you sympathize with the past, you're looking at reasons why we should care. Not the stuff that, is horrific, like I said, but this is kind of similar. When you idealize rural life, you're not telling, like, the graphic details of realities.